In today's video, I want to discuss whether Vanguard have lost the plot. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I know what you're thinking, not our beloved Vanguard, Tom. Fans of Vanguard are tribal in their unwavering support of everything that they touch. But when will the reality set in that the Vanguard of today is a very different company to the one that Jack Bogle set up back in 1974? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Wall Street. Looks lovely, doesn't it? Well, let's take a peek inside, shall we?
$350 Swiss.
Wird ja wahrscheinlich nicht so toll werden hier.
Kommt noch was Neues für euch raus oder nicht? Ich glaube, im Moment kommt nichts Neues raus.
Zurich 23 Citibank.
Essentially people yelling either down the phones or directly at each other. And if yelling doesn't work, you can always try waving your hands around like you're trying to land a 747.
These, how many?
Like total all day.
I need you to know, as my hands move, you're able to say what you see. What do they say? That's not buy one. This is buy one. Okay? And if you said that, what would the broker do? They would do exactly what you said. Buy one market. That's not what you want to do. You want to do what?
Pay one.
Pay one. Or in your area, which is S&P pieces, pay 10. Do what? Pay do what? Do what? Good. And the only thing you're waiting on now is what? The quantities. So if you see it, say it. You do not have to think about it in the means.
No idea. Wall Street was all about big money, high intensity, outrageous profit margins, and the lifestyles to go with it.
You had a bunch of young kids making more money than they knew what to do with, and they found things to do with it. You know, I mean, anything that you can think of that you could abuse yourself with, that was part of the lifestyle. There were 5 guys that rented a bus to take them to Michigan golfing. They hired a couple girls to go on the bus with them. And by the time it wasn't me, I want that out.
That is one of the best slips I have ever seen. It's like the great prophet Shaggy once said, "It wasn't me." What you've got to remember is the concept for Vanguard back then was pretty out there, with low profit margins, costs squeezed tighter than my post-Christmas waistline, and the birth of the very first market tracking index fund, all in an effort to drive down the cost of investing and make it simpler for you as the investor. Something Jack's Wall Street counterparts weren't really on board with. What Vanguard were trying to do was essentially the same as a mini metro salesman strolling into Lamborghini's showroom to try and convince their customers to buy one of these instead of one of these. The investing world, especially up to this point, was very much a luxury industry, and it was full of high profit margins and people making big money. So the Vanguard model of aggressively low costs was pretty wild and very disruptive. And you can imagine it, can't you? Everybody just scoffing at the idea and waiting for the day that Vanguard would die. Except it didn't. And as they got traction, they kept doing more of the same, absolutely convinced with 100% faith that this was the way forward for future investing and that the industry needed a bloody good shake-up, and Vanguard were here to do it. And it worked. Vanguard have risen to become a top name in investing, both for its funds and its platform in general. You've only got to scroll through YouTube to see the countless number of people posting videos of their portfolio updates, showing you them building their portfolios on the Vanguard platform. The problem is it can be tough at the top. Vanguard has a target on its back, and like with any success story, there are now loads of imitators. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, don't they? But I can't imagine how frustrating it must be knowing that if you bring something innovative to market that is a success, you just know that people are going to copy you and try and pinch some of the rewards. One of Vanguard's biggest challenges is this luxury industry that they are a part of has deep pockets. And with deep pockets comes glossy brochures, well-marketed funds, fancy lunches to convince investors to come on board, all of which Vanguard refuse to take part in, both because it's not what they're about, but also I think because their pockets are a little bit smaller. If you want to now go and grab yourself a low-cost index fund off the shelf to invest in, you have loads of options, Vanguard being one of them, of course. This increased competition naturally focuses attention on costs and drives them down, which is good news for you as the investor, but you can imagine if you're already an aggressively low-cost model like Vanguard, being in a pricing war can be pretty tough. Imagine Aldi and Lidl having to find another 25% savings off the cost of a loaf of bread. We'd end up just be eating the bloody crusts. There's just not a lot of juice left to squeeze. Bread doesn't have juice, Tom. If we look back at 2020, Vanguard were actually knocked off the top spot in the US if we look at it in terms of how much money investors place with them, as the BlackRock iShares range actually hoovered up more client money. In 2021, that looked set to continue, but in the second half of the year, Vanguard came back swinging and, last time I checked, had reclaimed that top spot. Despite having to cut costs to remain king of the pack, Vanguard do still remain top dog. In 2021, they still hoovered up 40% of the net index fund sales, which is a hell of a market share in what is a very competitive marketplace. The biggest problem that I think Vanguard face, and the concern that I have, is that the playing field isn't level. It's a bit like the football Premier League, where you've got smaller teams that are expected to keep pace with the outrageous money of Man City. And when you think of it in football terms and look at it now, that outrageous money has risen to the top and pretty much stayed there. The very nature of Vanguard's own business is, in this area, almost its own worst enemy. A not-for-profit, run-for-investors type organisation simply doesn't have the same firepower as the people they are now playing against. You've got the likes of Fidelity, whose higher profit margin business pumps about $2.5 billion every year into their own technology. Vanguard can't keep up with that. I'm sure if you ask them, they would say they don't want to, but there is a risk of not innovating and trying to keep up could cost them. Where's the UK app for investors, Vanguard? But if we look a little deeper and we look at Fidelity's numbers, they didn't attract anywhere near the amount of investor money that Vanguard did, so you could argue that it's not working, for now. If you stand still, you get left behind, and I'm sure Vanguard would agree that their business has been squeezed. Not like bread. You don't squeeze bread. So is there any evidence of them struggling against this backdrop? Well, maybe yes. I've seen and read lots of people complaining about their customer service, which is very often the first thing to go to the wall when businesses face a tough period. Back in the day, they would be keen to tell you all about how they answered the phone within 3 rings. But everything that I read says that that is no longer the case. I have to say though, this is all a bit hearsay. I myself personally haven't had much dealings with having to call Vanguard, but a good friend of mine and YouTube creator Damien from Damien Talks Money did put that to the test.
It's 10:30 on a Friday when I'm filming this. I've got this number here. I'm going to call their customer service number, see how long it takes to answer. Me and Cobweb will be patiently waiting, won't we, mate?
If you'd like to speak to one of our agents, please continue to hold and note that our calls are recorded for training and monitoring purposes.
Stay in your face, Cobweb.
Hello, good morning. You're free to Vanguard. This is Faye speaking.
I mean, that was pretty good. I hung up on her. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. That was 50 seconds from calling them to getting an answer. So, you know, in my opinion, that's pretty strong.
Thanks, Damo. My conclusions from that are numerous. Number 1, their customer service isn't that bad at all, or maybe it's simply improved. Number 2, the normal thing to do when people answer the phone is to say hello. You essentially just pranked Vanguard. Next you'll be egging Bogle's house. And number 3, if there was ever an audition for the next Bond villain, that was it, right? Cobweb on lap, spinning chair, collect your Oscar please. In truth, I think Vanguard's focus is probably elsewhere. An example of this is they've moved closer into my world as a financial advisor by launching their very own personal financial advice arm. They say it is a low-cost, easy-to-access investment advice service that could see you retire with more money. Vanguard only have so much money to pump into improvements and new projects, so if, say, for example, their focus is here on this advice arm, then it can't be elsewhere, like, say, on existing customer experience. I tell you one place their money definitely isn't, and it's in their YouTube videos. You tell me how informative this is.
In order to determine your number for retirement, you're going to have to figure out what your expenses are going to look like. So Vanguard's website does provide tools to help estimate what your expenses could be. And then from there, it will tell you how much you'll need for retirement.
That's it. 20 seconds. You know how much you need for retirement now? Yep, perfect. Me too. The thing that has confused people even more is their ever-growing involvement with active funds, which seems to go against their general ethos. I actually did this video here recently where I compared one of their active funds with the ever-popular passive life strategy range with pretty surprising results, a link to which I'll leave in the description below. The truth is that Vanguard have had active funds for a very, very long time, so this mantra that they're all about passive index funds is simply not correct. But this focus on active funds and this advice arm does seem to be a different direction to what their success was built on. That being said, their ethos still underpins even this change in direction. The advice arm is very competitively priced. I couldn't tell you whether it's good or bad, I have no experience of it. And the funds are still cheap too, both passive and active. So, Vanguard have both stood still in some ways and evolved in others. Some would say away from what has made them a success. I do hope Vanguard don't lose their identity. I guess that's my fear. Vanguard are moving closer and closer to other investment companies, but actually I think when you look at it closer, it's more true to say that these other investment companies have actually been moving closer and closer towards Vanguard. For you as the investor, it has never been easier or cheaper to invest, and all this competition only helps with that. This is a golden age for investing, and if you're not investing already, you really are missing out. Maybe you're nervous about investing because of the risk that comes with it, and maybe you feel a little bit like my bread and juice analogy, a little bit lost. So if you watch this video here, I'll talk you through exactly how much risk you should be taking, no matter what your circumstances. See you over there.